All right, good morning, everybody. Good morning. Good morning. We are here to talk about corporate power and what we are going to do about it. Is that where you want to be?
Yeah.
All right. My name is Liz Ryan Murray. I'm the Policy Director at National People's Action. Here I'm based in Southern California, so I'm cold. We're going to talk today about some national ideas and some local ideas and ways people are pushing back against corporations and getting them to pay their fair share. I'm going to start by talking a little bit about how we got in the place we are right now. Okay? So for decades, big corporations and the wealthy had felt limited by government. We're talking about back in the 50s and 60s. Policies that have been developed after the Great Depression in the 1920s, what was that called? Anybody remember what that package of stuff, the New Deal? Oh, 5 points. Those policies revolved around the idea that we needed government to play an active role in our economy to keep corporations from driving us into crisis. Central roles of the government in this were twofold: regulation, keep the banks in check, keep corporations in check, and redistribution, taxing the rich and corporations to provide the social welfare programs and infrastructure needs for regular working people. Pretty simple. This resulted in a stable economy and the strongest economic growth in U.S. history. There was significant upward mobility, and many working people now had the resources to buy a home, own a car, send their kids to college, without going into massive debt. Not everybody had access to these benefits. Let's not kid ourselves. Women and people of color were often excluded. But by the time the 60s came around, rich people were getting pretty tired of these restrictions. A group of economists based in the University of Chicago played a big role in developing an agenda to dismantle the New Deal and make it easier for big corporations to have their way. These economists believed that the government needed to get out of the business of regulating the economy and the redistribution, and that if corporations were free to have their way, the market would be stronger. They call it anti-government. They call it small government. What it is government for corporations. It's government that is not doing anything. They're in there helping corporations do better. These guys came up with and I say guys on purpose, these are all guys, developed a policy agenda to advance these ideas. Cutbacks, cuts to welfare, Social Security, cut taxes, cut education, limit workers' rights, and corporate power. Deregulation, environmental, labor, finance deregulation, tax cuts, wealthy and the corporations, and all the trade deals to cut trade barriers. They developed a strategy to move that policy agenda forward. Number one, the money war. There's another breakout that's happening right now about this one. Buy off politicians. Build powerful corporate lobbies that work to influence both sides of the aisle. An air war to promote their ideology. Most of us have had to deal with Fox News. That's not an accident, what happens there. Their values of anti-government, individualism, free market, all get pushed out over and over and over. And a ground war. They want to build a social base to win over working class white voters through appeals to racism, social conservatism, and U.S. nationalism. And shock doctrine. That's to take advantage of crisis moments to move their agenda forward. It took us a while to fully realize the impact that has had on our work. This last 50 years has hurt us. But it's important for us to be clear, it didn't just happen. This isn't nature, this isn't a tidal wave, this isn't a tsunami. I don't know, that's the same thing. A hurricane. This was a plan that got moved against us. So where are we today? Big financial crash. Sure, we all remember that. We're still living with the consequences. On the one hand, the period since the crash represents huge gains for the wealthy and big corporations. They were able to profit by driving the economy into the ground and then bailed out with government dollars. They used the bailout money to make more profit instead of stabilizing the economy. In this sense, they took advantage of this crisis they had created to make more money and keep their vision moving forward. Median household wealth has fallen. Most of the gains since the recovery have gone to the wealthy. We could look at this as a huge win, this period. But at the same time, Their agenda has started to show its real limits. Their strategy is showing cracks. Their agenda has gone into crisis on a couple levels. They're having a crisis of policy and a crisis of legitimacy. Crisis of policy, what do I mean? Their anti-regulatory push was exposed for how dangerous it was. And we got some policy wins, things like the Dodd-Frank Reform Act, the Wall Street Reform Act. Pardon?
I say they diluted it too.
They did, but we got a good bunch in there that couldn't have been imagined in Reagan and Bush. For big foreclosure settlement, again, limited. Some payday victories, limited. We're going to win more. But a conversation has opened up about the need to regulate banks more and big corporations, the need to tax the rich. But their crisis of legitimacy, probably even more significant. They have come to power by winning over the poor, working class, middle class white people through these appeals to racism and nationalism they talked about. People are seeing through that. Poor and working people of all races are starting to see through it. The possibility of winning over large sections of this country is real. And we're seeing it. We're seeing it in the emergence of things like the Occupy movement. Certain campaigns that are out there talking about things that probably wouldn't have been even thinkable last go around. Black Lives Matter movement has meant it's harder for anyone to talk about inequality without talking about race. The Moral Monday movement, which we'll hear a little bit more about what's happening in Illinois, and the Fight for 15. All of these are signs there is momentum building. We're going to talk about some of these opportunities today, but first, I don't want to skip over the fact that the pain is real. And what this austerity policies have done to us is real. So let's spend a minute or two with everybody. How has austerity, how have budget cuts, corporate power affected you and your family?
Loss of transit in our community because of funding from the federal and state lost. Huge cut.
Yes.
And where are you all from?
Wausau, Wisconsin.
Wausau, Wisconsin.
Wow.
So it's harder to get to work, it's harder to get to the doctor, harder to get to
Yep.
school.
And jobs.
And jobs, yeah.
How can you get out of poverty if you can't get around, can't afford a car or can't drive?
Right. Yeah, that doesn't hurt the CEO who's got a driver.
No. That's right.
Wage stagnation,
Wage.
very little for the generation on below me.
Everybody hear of wage stagnation. Wages aren't going up.
But if we retain Social Security, we'll have a big effect on that because it's based on your wages.
Right.
Yes.
Absolutely right.
So all these massive banks we bailed out are finding more and more ways to rip off their customers too, with extended fees for this and extended fees for that. And
Yeah.
Didn't they make enough money off of us?
Apparently not. Yeah, if we could harness that creativity.
Yeah, no kidding.
Their assault on science.
That's a big
Absolutely
one.
taking away our right to collect data on
Yes.
climate change,
Right.
on drug companies monitoring
Yeah.
new products and profits, but their plan to assault science.
That's,
Independent science,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, that's
It's
a good
paid
name.
for by them. Yep.
Well, constructing education,
yeah,
what you can learn.
And
absolutely.
unions.
Yep.
Right?
Corporations, my son worked for two, I probably shouldn't name him, but he worked full-time, but it was said to be a part-time job. He had no benefits, no sick leave, and no vacation. And this one company, after you were there's some kind of law, I don't know what allows them to do it. You work a year, they lay you off for 6 months, we'll bring you back for a year, lay you off for 6 months.
Oh, that's.
That was Wells Fargo, I'm gonna tell you.
Very right.
And I don't know how they legally get away with it, but it's
It
called,
was seasonal employment.
it was
Yeah.
40 hours a week, no nothing.
Oh.
His CEO needed to make more.
That's right. Yeah. That's great. And last one.
So right here in Iowa, last year, the legislature agreed to $50 million to add on to the education budget, and the governor vetoed that. And then only this year is proposed giving corporations a $50 million tax cut just by rewriting regulations. And the legislature hasn't been involved in that at all.
Right.
That's good.
Last one.
How about all these big stadiums that we're building for the rich people?
Oh, no, that's not for the
education.
rich, that's it's kind of like the old Greeks, you know, the bread and circuses is what we're getting. So you get these things that are entertainment instead of news, you get all this stuff that's entertainment instead of actually encouraging us to get out on the streets. Right, keep them happy, keep them off the streets, if you get out, you know, they probably are, you know, that's how it works, yeah, I think.
I'm
I
gonna
would say
say
just one little
Yeah,
last
please.
thing is that my high school in Southwest Iowa closed this year. If you look around here, you will see hardly anything going on for miles and miles and miles in the rural. And the rural has been disinvested because agribusiness gets all the tax breaks. Agribusiness, where the money goes only to the rich, the people who are actually doing all the work hardly get any pay. I mean, it's all the same corporations, and it's not farmers feeding the world either.
No.
That's them feeding their bank account, Monsanto's bank account.
I missed your money.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say, this is also a question of democracy. I mean, in my city, the people voted very clearly against the stadium, but because of the laws, it was only advisory. And so the council did what they wanted and they built it anyway. The same thing in the state of Illinois. We had a referendum on the minimum wage, on raising the minimum wage. The people passed it overwhelmingly. 2/3 of the people voted for it. But it's only advisory because in our Constitution, there's no democracy. That's got to change.
No kidding.
So, Mrs. Bell, would you introduce yourself and tell us about how we're pushing back?
Okay, my name is Adele, and I'm from One North Side Organization. Okay, we are working on solutions, and one of the solutions is that the corporations need to pay their fair share.
That's right.
That's right.
In Illinois, we're being stretched, and we still don't have a state budget. And as a result, services are being cut, and I mean really cut. And on top of this, they just raised the sales tax and the property tax. So every day, people are paying more and more. But to every problem, there are always solutions. And that's why we're here today. We believe big corporations and the 1% need to pay their fair share in taxes. Next, we'll talk about specific tax policies that make the rich and big corporations pay their fair share in order to prevent more harm from being done to our communities.
All right, I'm going to start with talking a little bit about some of the things that are happening nationally, and then we're going to talk some about more local things that are happening. So first, I'm just going to pile on. Everybody's a little depressed, I'm going to make you more depressed. In 1952, corporations paid 33% for our budget. Now, they pay 9%.
But
Yes.
Who's making up that difference?
We are.
We are. And in cuts.
Usury.
Right. There's more burden on them, there's more burden on us, and they've slashed everything and kept our infrastructure and all the things we just talked about that are happening. Loopholes. $360 billion in corporate loopholes were just made permanent in this last budget.
Oh, yeah.
Just Wall Street's very favorite loophole, the active finance exception, which is an offshoring one, costs us $78 billion. With that money, just that $78 billion, we could send every working and middle and low-income four-year-old in this country to high-quality preschool. But no, we're giving it to GE, and we're giving it to Wells Fargo. So we got to close loopholes. $2 trillion is parked offshore. We've got to close those loopholes. They can't keep hiding their money, and they can't do this thing called inversion, which is where they pretend they're foreign, but they use our roads, and they keep everybody that they have employed here, and their CEOs live here, and they take all the benefits and try to get out of it. Great Victory, led by these folks in Illinois, kept Walgreens here. Walgreens tried to pull that, and we said, oh no. And now big drug companies trying to do it. So we're continuing to fight back on that. And we've got to close those loopholes.
Burger King just did that too.
Yeah, Burger
Yep.
King did.
Went to
They
Canada.
did. They went to Canada.
So we got to close the loopholes that allow them to park their money offshore. We also need just straight up fair taxes. I'm just going to talk a little bit later about what they're doing in Illinois on this, but there's also a federal thing called the Robin Hood tax. Are folks familiar with that? The Wall Street tax?
Yeah.
Yep.
Makes a ton of sense. What it is, it says all those trades back and forth, that high-speed trading that goes back and forth, not a penny of that is taxed.
No.
And that ain't right.
Anyway.
If we tax that at less than 0.5%,
Yeah.
we would bring $150 to $350 billion a year back home. And we'd get ourselves a safer market that wasn't crashing all the time. But we know how hard it is to move Congress right now,
Yes.
right? They're not the most functional groups in the world. But we'll keep pushing, and we've kept some bad things from happening. Some good things did happen in the budget. The child tax credit got made permanent. The earned income tax credit got made permanent. That's the stuff that actually benefits us. We got to keep pushing. But there's also some things that are moving in a lot of different states, and I want to talk about one in particular. It's about taking on corporations in a place where they've got us coming and going. Corporations aren't paying their taxes. We've been talking about that. They're also not paying a living wage, right? Workers in fast food, big retail, working full-time, have to rely on food stamps, on housing assistance, just to survive, right?
No.
This means we are padding their profits by taking care of their workers. We need to strengthen our safety net, not use it to pump up CEO bonuses. That's ridiculous. Walmart is my favorite example, and I will call them out. They don't pay their fair share in taxes. They don't pay their workers a living wage. And when all their workers need to rely on food stamps and need to rely on those things to get by for their families, you know the number one place in this country where food stamps dollars are spent?
Walmart.
Coming and going.
Yeah.
Enough. That's where the Responsible Business Act or the low-wage employer fee comes in. We're moving this in Cook County, Illinois right now. Connecticut tried it last year. They're going to try again. Colorado's looking at it. New Mexico's looking at it. Everybody else should be looking at it. It sounds complicated, but it's really simple. The Responsible Business Act or low-wage employer fee says that if you, corporation, refuse to pay your folks a living wage, you need to pay us back. It charges a fee on every single employee that makes under a living wage and uses that money, that revenue, for childcare, housing, healthcare services that low-wage workers need. It draws a bullseye on the folks who are driving this inequality. If you're a high-road employer that is paying a living wage, taking care of your community and your workers, great. This recognizes you as a responsible business and evens the playing field for you. That's, as I say, that's moving right now. We're hoping to get a vote next month in Cook County. Let me know if you want to hear more about it. We think it's an exciting idea. Now let's talk about some more. Oh,
When you say that, are you talking about referendums, or are you talking about through legislatures and referendums?
yes.
State legislature.
One of the great things about the Responsible Business Act is it can move in a lot of different places. It can move through a ballot initiative, it can move at a county level, city level, state level. It depends some on your state law. But it's a fee, it's not a tax, which is a little tricky. Because we're getting it in there saying, just like, you know, another analogy we use is for pollution, right? You come in, you dump all your stuff in the river, you can't expect us to pay to clean that up. You need to pay to clean that up. You dump your shit in the river, and they should pay for it. Pardon me. Like they call it, sometimes called an externality tax. They're dumping on our communities and creating poverty, and they need to stop having us pay that cost. So that's one of the ways you can get away with it in a lot of different municipalities. By saying, this is paying for a cost that you are pushing on us. We can talk more
Yeah, the only problem with that though is when you try to get some of these business act tax passed where you said they can go to city, county, and state. In Wisconsin with our idiot Walker, he would immediately pass some kind of a law in the state that would eliminate all that like this.
Yeah, preemption is a huge issue, so we need to get rid of that.
Yeah.
But I didn't say that this is free. We need to educate voters.
Yes.
All right.
Let's get rid of roadblocks.
There we go. So let's move on, let's talk about some of the things that are happening at other state in Illinois. I'm going back to you, Ms. Adele.
After me.
Back to you already.
Okay. One North Side is part of many coalitions, and one of them is called the Derick Comedy of Illinois. The Jane Addams Senior Caucus is also a member. The goal is to build statewide power. As I mentioned before, we still don't have a budget in Illinois. And our government does not bring in enough tax revenue to fund the services we need. We believe the budget crisis is a moral crisis, and we are inspired by the Moral Monday actions in North Carolina. We wanted to bring the voice of people of faith into the conversation about the state budget. With our allies, we organized 8 Moral Mondays over the summer. We had several hundred people each time. We would start at the State of Illinois building and then march to the offices of our governor's top campaign donors. We exposed these millionaires and billionaires and their role in creating a budget cut. Every time our speeches and posters demanded that big corporations and the 1% pay their fair share by closing corporation tax loopholes, a progressive income tax, and a Robin Hood tax. This past November, we participated in one big Moral Monday where we shut down the Chicago Board of Trade. Okay. Board of Trade, sorry about that. At that action alone, 43 people were arrested in an act of planned civic disobedience. All told, we mobilized 2,000 people through these actions with our allies. There were 150 acts of planned civic disobedience. We had over 50 Medium articles calling for the need to tax big corporations and the 1%. And best of all, and more people got involved in our movement. We are slowly changing the narrative in Illinois by doing what is called the PowerPoint presentation with small people, groups of people, where we are helping to change the narrative. Someone here, I believe, can give more information on that.
Yeah, we can make sure that gets out to folks. It's a great popular education piece to help people understand the context of what's happening and what they can do. We'll get that, make sure it gets out to everybody.
Okay.
I need to stand, move around. Right. My name is Anna. I am with Jane Addams Senior Caucus. So we are a part of Fair Economy, Illinois. It's Jane Addams Senior Caucus. One Northside, Iron, Soul, and Illinois People's Action. Amen. We are all the member organizations of National People's Action in Illinois. And so we have been out mobilizing people across the state. We've been doing political education pieces. We've been doing direct action. We have thousands of people ready to fight, right? We do it for media, but we also do it to hold accountable the people who are supposedly working for us, right? The people in Springfield, the people in our state capitals, the people in our city councils. We pay their salaries, but they're not really paying attention to us, right? And that needs to change.
Right.
So we have a legislative plan that Ms. Adele hinted at. We have a 3-pronged attack. We are changing the Illinois state tax structure to a progressive tax. We'll get there in a minute. A fair tax. We are doing some corporate tax reform, and we're passing a Robin Hood tax. So the fair tax, right? So in Illinois and some of your states, we have a flat tax where everybody pays the same tax amount. It used to be 5%. Because we have lots of cowardly legislators, and then we got a new governor who is slashing our state. It actually went down The richest man in Illinois got $16 million back in a tax refund, and then he gave the governor $13 million. So our politicians are paid off, right? So a fair tax sounds fair. It's not fair because of all deductions and exemptions. People who are low and middle income end up paying a lot more of their income in taxes. Somewhere around 12% of their income is paid in taxes, and the very wealthy, the 1%, pay more like 4% of their income.
That ain't right.
That ain't right. So we want to change it to a progressive tax, right? So the less you make, the less you pay in taxes. The more you make, the more you pay in taxes.
Right.
In Illinois, it's a two-phase process. In our Constitution, it says we have to have a flat tax. So first, we need to use our people power to get out, our constituent power to get out and talk to our legislators to pass a bill in the House and the Senate in Springfield to say, yes, okay, we agree that you can go do the work of changing the Constitution. So that needs to pass by May. So first we're running a really strong legislative plan. Then we need to get out into the streets and get the voters involved, because then on the ballot in November 2016 of this year, wow, how did that happen? Then people need to vote and say, you know what? We all need to pay our fair share. We need to tax the rich and let low and middle income people pay their fair share as well. So then they need to vote on it as well. So it's a two-phase system. The next piece of our tax reform is changing corporate tax reform, right? So the first step of that is corporate tax transparency. In Illinois, 2/3 of corporations don't pay their taxes. Ooh. How do we know that? There was a mess up. At the federal level, there was a slip up. Somebody released that information, but we don't know who doesn't pay the taxes. And you know what? Neither do any of you, because there's no state in the union that allows for corporate tax transparency. So that's the first thing that needs to change. You can all get those bills started in your states. So that's the first step. We need to know who doesn't pay their taxes, and then we need to make the corporations pay their fair share. So all these corporate tax loopholes need to be eliminated. So we have bills in the Assembly to cut all corporate tax loopholes. We want big oil and gas tax loopholes cut, and we want little tax loopholes cut, movie industry tax loopholes cut. I once had a very right-wing senator come up to me, a legislator come up to me and get in my face and say, you want to cut big oil and tax, but do you want to cut all these little tax loopholes too? And I said, well, yeah, that'd be good too. Like, we don't want to exempt any corporation, right? So that needs to happen next. And then the last piece is the Robin Hood tax. We call it the LaSalle Street tax in Illinois because our Wall Street is LaSalle Street, right? Yeah. So when you and I go down and we shop at our local neighborhood stores and we buy something, we get taxed on our purchase. Yep. And then the small businesses actually then pay their taxes too, right? They're not big corporations. They don't get those loopholes applied to them. So we're all paying taxes on every transaction that we make. However, when corporate lobbyists and when rich people go and do their trading on the stock exchanges, they pay nothing. There are, I don't know how many transactions happen each day, but there are a couple options in Illinois, somewhere between 25 cents per transaction up to $2 per transaction that is being negotiated, that could generate billions of dollars a year. Billions. It would eliminate our debt right now in Illinois. We're running at least a $6 billion deficit, and that's only increasing every day. It would eliminate that completely. It is time for the 1% and for corporations to get with the program and pay their fair share. So all of these can be done in your state as well. Thanks.
Could you explain briefly how that got into your constitution about a fair tax?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm assuming it wasn't us who put it
So who was it before people would put it there?
I don't think so. I'm going to guess no. That's a good question, though. I actually don't know.
I have a question that's been bugging me for a long time. I feel like the Grinch that stole Christmas when I say this. But there is a theory that you cannot tax a business. For example, if you put a big tax on Exxon Oil Company, they simply raise the price and they get it back.
Yeah, it turns out that's not actually true. That's called a threat. It's the same thing with the, we're gonna move, and we're gonna lay people off. Turns out when you actually tax people, and Minnesota's a great example of this, and John's gonna talk next, when you actually tax people at a rate, and corporations, everybody does better. There's more money in the economy for them to sell their goods. They lie.
Well, they don't want to price themselves out of the market either, because that's their whole thing, is they want to sell goods.
That's
Right, right. So that's just the fallacy. It's just like here in Iowa too, that we need to pass the combined reporting law that they keep not doing. So those of you from Iowa need to press every single one of your legislators to keep doing that.
We're gonna have some more time for questions and conversation. I do wanna toss over to John.
Okay.
Talk about Minnesota.
Okay, well, I want to preface this by saying that in 2012, after the election, or 2013, we inherited like a $6 billion deficit from the Pawlenty administration, who oversaw the collapse of the 35W bridge into the Mississippi River right after vetoing on infrastructure. So they left us with $6 billion deficit. They stole 400. I can't remember the exact number. A lot of that they had stolen from our schools to try to pretend, to do a shadow show like they were actually balancing the budget, and then we found out that wasn't true. So we turned that into a $1.1 billion surplus now, and they're complaining about that. And our governor is going to give it back all to the schools. We repaid that already in the ensuing 2 years. But so here's kind of the details of how we did it. But you know, I want to say, grassroots organization had a lot to do with all of this. We were there all along. We were in the Capitol. We were talking to legislators. We were on phones. We were demonstrating. You know, we were in Wells Fargo and U.S. Bank space constantly throughout this process. And so here's the official statement. Okay, here we go. So, during Minnesota's 2013 state legislative session, the legislature and governor enacted historic changes to the state's tax code. Over the next 2 years, Minnesota raised $1.1 billion by asking the wealthiest 2% of earners to pay 2% more.
Yeah.
Closed over $400 million in corporate tax loopholes, raised another $400 million in tobacco taxes, a levy nearly raised $100 million in taxes on large inheritances, and we enacted a mini version of a sales tax reform, taxing digital goods and a handful of business services while lowering other taxes. Taken together, this tax plan is equal in its scale and scope to the changes of the 1971, this is kind of famous in Minnesota, 71 Minnesota Miracle, or the Depression-era reforms of a famous governor named Floyd B. Olson. Most importantly, the plan sets Minnesota on a path to adequately fund the public systems that all Minnesotans rely on. Our staff and leaders have done a lot of writing on this in various publications, especially around Minnesota. There's some really good liberal media online, and so they've been staying busy with that. Take Action Minnesota has played a leading role for the last 4 years in Invest Minnesota Coalition, acting as a member of the steering committee, chairing its field team, and in this year co-leading its lobbying efforts. Invest in Minnesota is the standing coalition organized by Minnesota Budget Project that brings together faith, labor, and nonprofit allies to advocate for fair and adequate revenue. In addition to its role, Invest in Minnesota, Take Action Minnesota also led a campaign focused on closing the state's corporate tax loopholes, and we have that bill working in the state of Minnesota. I was there when we handed it to our senator, who took about less than 5 minutes to look at this jacket and say, oh yeah, I'll put my name on this, asking for corporate transparency. We know that Wells Fargo has 27 offshore tax havens, and they don't pay any tax. Matter of fact, they get rebates. But we can't technically prove it unless we have transparency. So the next senator was my senator, who co-signed that bill, and so it's working. Problem is, right now, because we did all this good stuff, the Republicans came back with a vengeance in 2014. They have the majority right now, so the only way this stuff is gonna happen is, you know, it trickles down. That's the real thing, the only thing that really trickles down is our responsibility to be engaged in the democracy. We have to oust this bunch of Tea Party maniacs out of our House of Representatives and get the majority back so we can enact this stuff. So,
Were you redistricted up there so badly though, that's not gonna happen for a while? 'Cause that's what's happened to
we'll see.
Wisconsin.
I mean, the answer to that is always we'll see. We have great ground campaigns and, you know, that happened in 2010, the redistricting, and we knocked their socks off in 2012. So I think it's about getting people out, doing a lot of phone work, a lot of door knocks, and making sure that people understand that the people that are showing up, it's working really well for them. ExxonMobil and Wells Fargo and those people, they show up every day, and it's working really well for them. So, I mean, that's my bumper sticker on that. So, in our campaign to close corporate tax loopholes, we deployed our 4 distinct strategies that led to closing over $400 million in tax loopholes. We had coalition building, we convened with allies, Minnesotans for a Fair Economy, Isaiah, SEIU, local union, and the Minnesota AFL-CIO. We had this standing table focusing on closing corporate tax loopholes. During the tax conference committees during those couple of years, we were always present. And we drafted letters and had 15 organizations co-signing, outlining over $1.7 billion in progressive revenue options that we collectively supported. So we also did a lot with the media, of course, earned and paid media. We generated consistent media on all sorts of different things, acting up and stuff that we actually published and stuff. And so we also ran online on this, one of the online liberal news sources called MinPost on corporate tax loopholes, and that was viewed by 74,200 people. So we also ran an online forum communication in northern Minnesota that was viewed by 35,000 people. And, you know, this is a big part of it, is getting our message out there. The other guys are really, really good at getting their message out there. It might be a pack of lies, but they're really good at telling them, you know.
Right.
So.
The Republicans have over the Democrats is their messaging. Like this stuff, this text, people buy into that. You can't tax the rich, you just can't, it's gonna kill us.
Yeah.
That's their messaging.
We just have to keep
Well,
speaking
and
the truth,
it
you know?
isn't
I had a lady the other day at food support office, kept telling me she was averaging my income, and that's why my food support's getting cut. And I kept telling her, 1 month is not an average. And she kept saying her thing, and I kept saying, 1 month is not an average. And I said that about 6 times, and she finally goes, okay, have your employer send us 6 months worth of your records so we can really average it out. So it's like you just gotta keep telling your story. Don't listen to that lie. You know, don't let them lie and get away with it. So, okay, so we did, you know, we had policy advocacy, we organized expert grassroots testimony on corporate tax loopholes throughout the legislative session. We also had a lot of grassroots mobilization. We activated hundreds of Minnesotans, I say thousands, to demand tax fairness. We were door knocking. Over 1,500 face-to-face conversations in key communities in the Twin Cities alone. We went to even Democratic legislators who were kind of stonewalling it and had their own constituents write them letters. We did a lot of phone calling, 1,401 constituent calls to legislators statewide, and we used that system where you can transfer the person right over to the guy's voicemail, so they can leave a voicemail. A lot of phone calling, a lot of letter writing, collected and delivered. This is what I was talking about. 245 handwritten letters from their own constituents to key legislators. And a lot of legislator visits. We had 223 constituent visits with legislators. And we would go lobbying a lot, and if they weren't there, they're down in the committee room or whatever, we would leave them a note, we would leave them some information, we would let them know that we were there. Facebook, we shared a lot of stuff on Facebook about tax fairness. We supposedly reached almost 70,000 people and engaging 4,000 people and creating 2,700 people talking about this thing. So we consider this a historic victory, but we realize that tax fairness is only one part of what's needed to reduce our state's wealth and income inequality and to stabilize our public systems. In upcoming months, we will continue to innovate around tax, state and federal tax policies while expanding our focus to include taking on the challenges of low-income work. We believe a new, more just economy is not only possible, it's necessary to improve the health, stability, and the civic life of Minnesota, and it's on us, right?
Absolutely.
So I'm up here tweeting. I'm tweeting too. Share that everybody who can't be in the room. So we want to open it up and talk about what do you, if you have any questions for folks, and then what are you going to try?
Okay, my concern was, when we surrounded the Chicago Board of Trade, was the police brutality of them ramming people with motorcycles and God knows what else they were doing. Did they ever get in trouble for that? I know that the Chicago police are being, looked into now, but that was criminal.
Did you guys have cameras and photograph that stuff?
But then what do you do with it?
You put it out on Facebook and YouTubes and everything else. That's the kind of thing that really gets people fired up. It does.
I was part of kind of keeping the legal process of that together and supporting the people who got arrested. So there wasn't any direct action that we took against the police.
Yeah.
There's a lot of direct action that's happening against the police, so I think anecdotally that just adds to the story. But yeah, the focus was not on that particular direct action. But yeah, they were pretty brutal.
But now the police are being investigated by the federal government in Chicago?
A lot is happening with the police in Chicago, and for good. And our particular action didn't play a piece. Like, we are not the main players of what's going on with police brutality in Chicago. So, and I think that as allowing young black activists to do the main work of police brutality in Chicago is the correct step. And so,
because they're the victims.
Absolutely.
I think you really need to keep the pressure on your Dino governor. Dino is Democrat in name only, by the way.
Oh, no, he's not.
Oh, I thought he was a Democrat.
No, it's a Republican now, they changed it.
Oh, well, that's why he's a Dino. He was a Democrat in name only. Anyway, but that really keeping the pressure on him, because if he wants to keep his job, he's going to have to make some changes. So that pressure needs to stay on.
Yeah, you're doing it.
I was a little disappointed that you didn't talk at all about corporate welfare. And like, I'm from Ames, right up the road, and now the city council is very stealthily over 5 years marshaled the forces to create an industrial park east of 35, which means the citizenry is going to pay to get the infrastructure over there. It's millions. And they've already raised the utility rates to help pay for it. Plus, who knows how much in bond issues, and there's no company in sight, but this is our dream. We're all gonna get rich if we do this.
Is there going to be transportation?
So
Transportation out there so people can get jobs out in the industrial park.
So this is an immediate way, without having to change anything, is to pressure local governments to stop this damn, our state governments to stop this damn corporate welfare.
Okay, so in Minnesota, in previous administration, when they let the bridge fall, they had stripped away all citizen oversight about things like that, all local communities. I live 50 miles south of Minneapolis, pretty rural, but there's intellectual community there too. That's 2 really nice colleges, and so it's a very interesting mixture, but it's a lot of big farms. And our legislators in 2 years reinstated citizen oversight in situations like this, where local communities had a say in what kind of development took place in their communities. And as soon as the Republicans got back in, even before the session started in December, they were going after it and they were trying to strip it away. So I think, to me, what that ends up saying, more and more to me, is it's our responsibility to keep people in office that serve us, serve all the people. And, It's not always easy, but we can't give up that fight. It's disgusting and dysfunctional and depressing as it is to see how corrupt it is. If we give up, they're going to win for sure, and we're going to be in the middle of it.
If any of you, oh, go ahead. One back here, Lauren.
I'm from St. Louis and all the Ferguson stuff that is going on. I'm with Missourians Organizing for Reform and Empowerment. And we have part of our program is Power Behind the Police. And by investigating, because this brutality that goes on, they are sponsored and enabled to do that by the resources that finance and do not put that in check. What's very interesting is to find out the corporations, which is also part of the prison industrial complex, but how all of these things are supported are interconnected. So once you can really start to investigate, you understand that it's interconnected and how we are really the ones that are lending our energies to enable these things to occur. So holding people accountable, I'm also part of Solidarity Economy St. Louis. So as we're deconstructing these things that do not serve the greater good, we're also envisioning and putting in place systems that do serve the community. So we're investigating urban farms, we're investigating entrepreneurial opportunities, time banking and barter and exchange programs. So we really have to, as individuals, we've been part of the many who serve the few, and realizing it's our energies and it's our resources that they have been profiting off of. So finding alternatives to not comply with assisting them to continuing to oppress us. We have to hold people accountable, but also envision and create systems that are serving your community and kind of step away, because they've had this system in process for really hundreds of years. So envisioning and designing and starting to implement programs that serve your community and your people better, and letting them understand how that impacts them and interconnects. And as I've been able to journey in this last year across America, community organizations, we are stepping up. So, get the word out there and envision and implement programs that serve your people. And, I think we're going to get it done.
Yeah.
We've got to get it done.
It seems like two different strategies here. One is go after the corporations, and the other is go after the 1%. And which one is the most? You concentrate on both. Yes. And what are the different strategies? You've always talked about the loopholes and everything, but,
I think the 1% and corporations are pretty much the same people. And a lot of times you need to look at what's going to what are the laws that, what's the Constitution like where I am, and what's going to be the easiest first step, like the corporate tax transparency.
Transparency. Well, corporates are more publicly regulated, so it's probably
yeah, more, not great, but yeah,
no,
right.
okay.
But that could be a first step, or looking at the inheritance taxes, or looking at, they're talking, closing loopholes on corporations and getting to a place where the income tax is fair. I think it's all the same folks, honest to God.
I think one of the strategies we've used in Illinois too is that you need to name names. Like, you can't just say X company and then people are, oh, well, that company is in my neighborhood or I buy from there. No, there's a person who's defending that company and making sure that that person and the other corporate managers at that company are staying rich. So we need to name names, right? And not let the corporations off the hook.
And go to
They're the same people.
in Washington, D.C.
That's right.
We flyered the president of U.S. Bank's neighborhood.
Yeah.
We went to his neighbors and said, look, this is what this guy's up to. This is what he's doing to people.
We got something?
Homes offices expose them, huh?
Yeah, that's right. I was absolutely right.
Kind of going along with what he said, what CCI does is go to a location, present them with a letter, large letter, knock on the door. Very often they don't come, So you have to read it publicly.
With the bullhorn.
With the bullhorn, which then generates questions from the neighbors. So you're not going out to the neighbors, you're answering their questions, which, with things that have already been written so that they don't misunderstand what you've said. So, you know, kind of put that whole thing into an information center thing like that. The question that I had was, there's a lot of labor intensity that goes into the platform setting for the political parties, but then nothing happens with the platform. I know in Iowa, there was a commitment from our county to follow up on the platform and keep at it with the legislators. You know, this is what you passed on, this is what you were elected on.
Right.
Is there any way besides, you know, the pinpointing actions where we could get a broader commitment and follow through with the parties?
It is a good question.
Well, okay, my answer to that would be saying keep the pressure on. One of the statistics we kept hearing over that 2-year period from some of our lead organizers was that if a legislator hears 10 phone calls about one issue, maybe not even that many, you've heard this before, right? It's going to cause them to at least pay attention to it, if not move on it. So, I mean, I just feel like, you know, we have to remember who's who here. Most people aren't any better than us. They're supposed to be representing us. And we're responsible. We got to own this democracy. We're responsible for keeping their feet in the fire.
That's right.
I do have a quick question, like how, because it seems like a lot of the businesses now, how do we make youth, or you know, youth are a lot of the workers now, so how do we make them aware of something, of stuff like this? So it's like, okay, you're not working for a company that's not helping you out at the same time. Like how do you arouse awareness for the newcomers into something like this? Because I wasn't aware of it either, you know. So it's a learning experience. How do you get that awareness out there for the younger youth?
How did you find out about it?
Actually through the Oversight, the NOC program.
For now?
Through my cousin.
Through your cousin?
Yeah.
Okay. So, you and your cousin? So, well, how else are folks reaching out? Oh, I'm getting the, it's time. But let's quick.
Invite them to libraries and present a forum. That's what we're doing in Bloomington, Illinois.
Like what you're doing?
Yeah, yeah, that's what I like I'm doing. Yeah.
Good job. The movie, The Big Short, people should
Oh,
see
yeah.
that.
I've
It's
seen it.
very
What is it
important.
called? The Big
Go
Short.
see it.
Thanks, everybody. You're on the first floor.